What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network, the channel dedicated to providing you with competitive Pokemon TCG content. Dallas Regionals 2019 is coming up this weekend, and so I have for you the meta forecast where we're going to be looking at charts and data and some survey responses from a small group of top players. So let's look at the Portland Day 2 meta. This was the last regional championships in expanded format that was black and white through Celestial Storm. Trevenant had the most slots in Day 2, followed by Zoroark Toad, followed by Zoroark Garbodor, which was also tied with Drampagarb, and we'll note that Archetypes was at 5th, tied with Buzzwole GX, Sylveon GX, and Sableye Garbodor. For this tournament, Archetypes didn't have as much hype as it did going into Anaheim, which we'll get to in just a bit. But Trevenant was the most successful deck in terms of Day 2 spots. Zorotoad was the second, and Zorotoad is actually what won Portland Regionals. And Zorogarb, which saw an increase in success in Anaheim, the next Regionals after Portland for expanded format, was number 3 here. And do note some of the more obscure decks here. We see the Zoroark Exodia, which wasn't really defined until after Anaheim when it got top 4, but a Zoroark Exodia type deck was played in Portland. Alone Executor, which saw a complete fall off for the next tournament. Sableye Garb, which I believe was also not seen for the Anaheim Day 2. And some of the decks like Sylveon GX, I feel that a lot of players looking at the expanded meta don't even realize Sylveon GX saw some success in Portland. So now Anaheim's Day 2 meta, 37.5% of the Day 2 was made up of Zoroark Garbodor. That was 18 spots. So there were 18 Zoroark Garbodor decks in Day 2 of Anaheim out of 48 players. Zoroark Garbodor was highly successful there. And second, Zoroark Toad, and Zoroark Toad won again, and was also, again, the second most popular deck in Day 2. Followed by Rayquaza GX, and then tied for the next spot was Drampagarb, Archetypes, Buzzwole GX, and coming out of nowhere, Zoroark Weavile. Archetypes was actually expected to do very well and to have a prominent showing for Anaheim Regionals, but actually saw less of a percent of success in terms of Day 2 in Anaheim than it did in Portland. Rayquaza GX and Zoroark Toad were very far, they were not close seconds and thirds to Zoroark Garbodor. Zoroark Garbodor just had a commanding lead of success for Day 2 meta share. We saw no Night March in Anaheim Day 2, but there was Lost March. Vespiquen actually got second place. And then, let's see, we have a Whale Lord, a Golisopod Garbodor, and that Zoroark Exodia that I mentioned. Some of the slots here for the 2.1% that aren't listed, one of them is Zygarde GX Lycanroc. So just rogue decks or lesser popular decks. But still, some of these things I should point out. Zoroark Weavile did have 2 spots in Day 2. It didn't top 8 or anything crazy like that, but it's just one of those decks that I feel like if a player sits down and plays against it, it's completely unexpected and expanded, even though it got 2 spots in the Day 2 of our most recent expanded tournament. It had the same amount as Archetypes, and we're expecting to play against Archetypes. So probably not as many Zoroark Weavile in Day 1 as there were Archetypes, but 2 players still made it into Day 2. Unfortunately, I do not have the Day 1 shares here. So comparing Portland to Anaheim, Portland is the blue lines and Anaheim are the red lines. Portland to the left and Anaheim to the right of each archetype. We'll see Trevenant. Like I said, Trevenant had a high Day 2 share for Portland, and then it dropped significantly for Anaheim. Whereas Zorogarb did the exact opposite. It had an okay showing in Portland, and just took off out of nowhere for Anaheim. Maybe I shouldn't say out of nowhere because we did expect it to be good, but I don't think anyone expected it to have 38% of day 2. Zorak Toad stayed around the same again. Drampa Garb stayed around the same. Buzzwole GX variants around the same. Archie Stoice dropped just a tiny bit. Rayquaza GX saw a big boost. Night March, it had spots in Portland but not in Anaheim, and then Lost March came out, which does work a bit differently, but Lost March did have a spot in Anaheim and wasn't even legal for Portland. Then we see some other weird things like Sceptile Plume with the Cradily, Travis Nunlist's creation that had a spot in Anaheim. Again, the Zoroark Weaviles that kind of are rogue. Like, we don't really expect Zoroark Weavile in Expanded. And also another important one to note is Lucario GX, which Israel Sosa got top 8 with. That was just a one-of for the day 2 out of all of it. And so this is Portland's and Anaheim's meta shares for day 2 combined. All 46 decks that day 2'd from Portland, combined with all 48 decks that day 2'd from Anaheim. So even when we combine that, Zorogarb is still in the lead by 12.8%. It's significantly in the lead even when you combine both of the day 2s. Zorotoad in 2nd, Trevenant in 3rd, Drampa Garb in 4th, and Archie Stoice and Buzzwole tied for 5th. I feel like this is going to be a very good chart to look at when you're trying to decide what you think the meta of day 1 at Dallas Regionals in the Masters Division will look like. Zorogarb, 23% is kind of high for a day 1 share, but I wouldn't be out of the question for it to hit something like that. I definitely do think it'll be in number 1, but number 2 might just be a little closer than we see here. I think number 2 is probably going to be Archie Stoice. Zoroark Toad usually doesn't see a huge day 1 share, or I should say Zoroark Control variants usually don't see a huge day 1 share. Since I'm on the topic of that, we'll note that Zoroark Control on this chart is identified as having 0 or 1 Seismitoad, while Zoroark Toad usually will have 3 Seismitoad EXs. So yeah, like I said, this is going to be a good chart to look at when you're trying to decide what you think you'll play against at Dallas Regionals during the 9 rounds of day 1. Even day 2, these are the decks that were successful for the last day 2s, but these are also going to guide what people are selecting to play for the whole of Dallas Regionals. Next, we have some of my reflections on these charts. So we see that Zorogarb increased from 4 to 18 day 2 spots, Portland to Anaheim. In review of the premium articles, something I did while putting all this together, the articles leading up to Anaheim from like 6 Prizes and Poke Beach and sites like that, Archie's Blastoise, Zorogarb, and Zoroark Control were evaluated as top choices, and here I'm putting Zoroark Control and Zoroark Toad in a kind of one category, because oftentimes I find when reading articles, watching videos, talking to players, a lot of times they'll say Zoroark Control and interchangeably refer to Zoroark Toad as that. But in the pie chart, Zoroark Control means just one or no Toad. So out of these 3 that I saw, top players as a whole call the top decks or top choices or decks they expected to perform well. Out of Archie, Stoice, Blastoise, Zorogarb, and Zoroark Control, Archie's was the weakest in Anaheim out of these 3, as it was exploited heavily by Zoroark Garbodor. Zoroark Garbodor is fairly good. Previously to Wailord Magikarp tag team coming out, I feel Zoroark Garb versus Archie's Blastoise was a fairly cut and dry matchup for Zorogarb players. That's what they wanted to face. Zoroark Toad still won Anaheim as well as Portland, and it was one of the top decks that top players were talking about going into this event. People didn't prepare, people didn't change off of Zoroark Toad, it still won, and it still was the same player, Jimmy Pendarvis, that won both events with it. Trevenant saw much less success in Anaheim than it did in Portland. I think that is because of the increase in Zoroark Garbodor, and in Zoroark decks in general. Archie's Blastoise saw more success in Portland than it did in Anaheim, which I thought was a little odd, as it had more backing for it going into Anaheim. But Zoroark Garbodor was also much more popular and well known as a really strong deck going into Anaheim. So from these, I have collected the following thoughts. I expect Zorogarb to be the most played deck, and the deck with most Day 2 spots, but less Day 2 spots than it had in Anaheim. Anaheim was insane that it had 18 Zoroark Garbodors in Day 2. I think it'll be a little more spread out. I think some Zoroark Garbodor players may be moving to other Zoroark variants. I expect Archestyce to see more success than it did in both Portland and Anaheim. I think Wailord Magikarp Tag Team is a really good card that it gained, and also decks are being built just a little bit differently. Trevenant will see a moderate amount of play, but I believe that it has low potential to see a great Day 2 conversion rate. So I don't think it's going to be anything like Zorogarb was for Anaheim, or even like Trevenant was for Portland. But I could see it being like maybe the 5th most Day 2 shares for a deck. Zoroark is the deck to beat. I think if you talk to a bunch of players, most of them will tell you Zoroark is the deck to beat, because that's the deck you're going to see. And I actually have a Survey Monkey that I had 18 top players respond to, and we're going to be looking at those results in just a bit, but that will reflect this. Zoroark is the deck to beat, and this will increase the number of Buzzwole GX decks that will be played. On paper, Zoroark Golisopod seems like the best choice for Dallas Regionals. So you can check out my deck profile on Zoroark Golisopod on this channel, but I will just go into it a bit. Zoroark Golisopod has type advantage versus Toad and the water attackers, or most water attackers that Archestyce will play. Golisopod is an efficient 1-energy attacker, and it attacks with basic energies. It's less hindered by Zoroark Toad. They can't Fabo away all the basic energies, and you can use basic energies on Oranguru to recycle resources. Zoroark Golisopod can be built to at least 50-50 Zoroark Garbodor, and I feel comfortable playing Zoroark Golisopod versus Trevenant. It has a lot of versatility. The deck can be built a lot of ways. It's a consistent Zoroark deck. Zoroark is inherently very strong and expanded, and I think Golisopod and the text that you can include in this kind of variant just really suit the meta that we're expecting for Dallas Regionals. Zoroark Exodia is appealing due to its potential to shut opponents out of playing the game. If you don't know what Zoroark Exodia is, it's built to red card the opponent, then delinquent the opponent, and then when the opponent's at 1 card in their hand, you peeking red card to see if it's a supporter or something that can get them a supporter or allow them to draw cards, and if it is, you peeking red card it back and they draw a new card, and if it was a bad card that won't let them progress their game state, then you let them keep that card from peeking red card. And you want to do this on turn 0 effectively, so if you go first and you get to do this quote Exodia combo, that's the pieces you need to do it, you can effectively shut your opponent out of playing the game, or put them into top deck mode where they need to like top deck a Sycamore and then hit a lot of stuff off of that, because they're not starting the game with their normal 6-card hand, or 7 including their draw. Even if they go first, let's say you're playing against another Zoroark variant, they bridge it out their 2 Zoruas and Tech Attacker, so they have something active, a Lele, and then their 3 bridgeted Pokemon. Maybe they're at a 4 or 5 card hand, something of that sort. You can, on your first turn, you still go for this Exodia combo and try to put them at 1 unplayable card in hand. And because of this control, this shutout turn 1, it's kind of high roll, but it's also a combo and control. Zoroark Exodia is very appealing to a lot of players. So next we have the Survey Monkey survey that I made. We have 18 people who participated in it. I reached out to about 24 players who I felt have high skill and an understanding of the expanded format. and whose opinions matter. These participants include Ty Pelicia, Jose Marrero, Rahul Reddy, Alex Szymanski, Michael Catron, Peter Kika, and Rukan Shao. And I think those names, these people who opted to have their names listed, that reflects the general population of the participants for this survey very well. Everyone's around this kind of stature and skill. So this SurveyMonkey has 4 questions in total. It was a short survey, takes about 2 minutes to fill out, but I think it gives some great insight on what the top players are thinking about this meta. So question number 1, which of the following archetypes do you expect to be the most played during day 1 of Dallas Regionals in the Masters Division? Choose only one. 16 out of 18 of the players who I surveyed answered Zorak Garbodor. We had 1 for Zorak Control with 0 to 1 Seismitoad EX, and 1 for Rayquaza GX. So, an overwhelming response said Zorak Garbodor. We're going to say Zorak Garbodor is probably going to be the most played deck of day 1 of Dallas Regionals in the Master Division. Question number 2. Which of the following archetypes do you expect to be the second most played during day 1 of Dallas Regionals in the Masters Division? Choose only one. Your choice must be different than your choice for question number 1. So, one of the 2 people that did not select Zorak Garbodor for the most played deck selected it for the second played deck. And then, in order, they responded Archetypes, Zorak Exodia, Zorak Seismitoad, Buzzwole GX variants, and Rayquaza GX. So it says here Buzzwole Lycanroc, but quickly a few people who were responding messaged me and asked if they could respond with the answer of Buzzwole Lycanroc if they wanted to respond with just Buzzwole GX variants in general, and I said, yeah, that's fine. So Buzzwole Lycanroc should reflect for this survey Buzzwole GX variants in general. And so again, I think this slide is very, very important going into Dallas Regionals. If you take Zorak Garbodor and put it right above Archetypes, because that was what an overwhelming amount of the people that responded to this responded with the most played deck. If we put it in order, Zorak Garbodor, then Archetypes, Zorak Exodia, Zorak Seismitoad, Buzz, and Rayquaza. I think that's also a very good list of decks to look at for decks to expect to be playing during day 1 of Dallas Regionals. So again, put Zorak Garbodor at the top of this chart we have to the left, and then go down in descending order. Question number 3 of 4. Select the 3 archetypes from this list that you most expect to be in top 8 at Dallas Regionals in the Master Division. So oftentimes you'll hear players say some decks are better for just guaranteeing points or trying to get into day 2, and then there's another kind of deck that you want to play that can win the tournament, that has an overwhelming amount of power and skill reliancy to allow you to win the tournament. So these are the 3 archetypes that these 18 players selected as the 3 decks they think will make top 8. So obviously there can be 8 different decks in top 8. There can be 1 deck that takes up all slots, but these are the 3 that players most expected out of this survey to be in top 8. In order, we have Zorak Garbodor, Zorak Seismitoad, Archetypes, Buzzwole GX variants, Zorak Exodia, Zorak Control, Zorak Golisopod, Lucario GX, Buzzwole Garbodor Shrine, Rayquaza GX, Vespiquen, Zorak variant not listed, and Drampa Garbodor. And on the right you can see all of the choices, and these were the choices for all 3 of these questions that we went over so far. So 15 out of 18 of the players listed Zorak Garbodor as one of their 3 decks. 9 of the 18 players listed Zorak Seismitoad as one of their 3 decks. 6 of the players listed Archetypes, and so on. You can read that in the chart to our right. I think this is also a very great chart if you are unsure of what you should expect to play against at Dallas. Another great slide here to inform you of which decks you should be expecting to play against. And lastly, a little bit of a different question. Question number 4, which of the following are most worthwhile to tech against? Rank 1 being the most, rank 4 being the least. So for this one, we had 17 respondents. I'm not sure if one of our 18 respondents couldn't fill this one out on their phone because it was kind of a sliding and ranking question, or if they weren't sure, they didn't want to answer. So this one had 17 responses out of 18 people. So the number one deck or variant or strategy, archetype, what have you, to tech against here in this survey is Garbotoxin Garbodor. And this means you would be playing Field Blowers or Fabas or Startling Megaphones, just or even decks that just don't rely on abilities. Number 2 is Seismitoad EX or Other Item Lock, and this would be countered by playing less items, more supporters. In that same vein, maybe drop a Versus Seeker for an extra draw supporter. Pokemon Ranger is also an option, and the Marowak that stops effects of attacks on the player. Pokemon Ranger is just a one-of supporter you can throw in, and also maybe lower your Versus Seeker count and up your Lele count, and that is a popular tech being thrown around amongst players. Third out of these 4 to tech against is Stall, Mill, and Control, which would be playing an Oranguru from Ultra Prism or a Bunnelby that can mill your opponent in response. And the last thing on this list to tech against is Night March and Vespiquen. So there were only 4 choices, and the least amount of people said Night March and Vespiquen, which would be Karen or Oricorio that can punish your opponent. I do think Oricorio might be a good tech in general, just because it can also do a fair amount of damage to a Buzzwole if you have a choice band on it. But these are, if you have 59 cards chosen for your deck and you want to tech for one more deck or one more card or one more variant, one more strategy, that's what this chart is here to help you with. If you were thinking, wow, should I put in a Field Blower or should I put in a Pokemon Ranger? What should I tech against? Also keep in mind that some of these variants hurt other decks more than others. So depending on what deck you have, take that into consideration. So here are some of my closing thoughts. I expect players to proof their decks in preparation for the Zoroark Exodia matchup and the Seismitoad EX matchups. And what I mean by this is that I expect players to put in more outs to drawing cards for the Zoroark Exodia matchup, so like Oranguru Instruct, more Shaman EXs, more ways to search for Shaman EXs, more Tapu Lele GX and more way to search for it, more draw supporters like Sycamore and N, or Cynthia, things that are good on turn 1. So probably not Colress to prepare for Zoroark Exodia, since that's normally not the best thing to see on turn 1. Seismitoad EX, you would prepare with less items in your deck, more supporters, maybe Pokemon Ranger. Those are ways to proof your deck. And also the Zoroark Exodia deck uses Shaman EXs. It plays 4 if people are net decking from the deck that got top 4 in Anaheim. And starting a Wobbuffet that prevents all abilities except for psychic abilities can really stop those Shaman EXs from firing off and can put a stop to your Zoroark Exodia opponent's plan. Vespiquen will probably not be heavily teched against. It got second at Anaheim, and it placed in day 2 at Portland. But there were really great players that played it. Connor Finton played it at Anaheim, and Rahul Reddy played it at Portland. But it didn't show up in numbers, and it's not the kind of deck that I expect to show up in numbers again. But I do expect it to make day 2, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 spots, and it could even make top 8 again. Maybe it'll win the whole tournament. But I don't expect it to be heavily teched against. And that is the reason why this should be a deck in the back of your mind to maybe even play yourself. Mr. Mime Bench Barrier is a smart tech in preparation for Wailord Magikarp Tag Team, which its GX attack, if you have 8 energy on it, it does 10 to the active and 100 to all the bench. There's a world where your Archetypes opponent gets this on turn 1 and loads up the Wailord and just blows away your Zoruas, and then you have nothing except your Lele's down. Mr. Mime Bench Barrier can prevent this from happening either early or late game, whenever it is. And Mr. Mime also has collateral help against Buzzwole GX's Jet Punch. Wobbuffet has been discussed as having potential, like I mentioned, for the Zoroark Exodia matchup, but I think it will see more success as a tech than as the center of a deck. Last year in Standard, there was a quad Wobbuffet deck, which also used Wobbuffet Break. I don't think that has the power level to succeed as a control mill stallish deck in expanded right now. There's a lot of things that can just draw a card or hit a card that allows them to draw out of the lock and then start knocking out Wobbuffets. But I do think Wobbuffet can be really good as a 1 of or 2 of to just start with or Floatstone out of to stop opponents from their shenanigans that involve Shaman EX and other non-psychic abilities. I expect 2 Field Blowers to be the minimum for any deck with important abilities. 2 Field Blowers is really, really, really the minimum, and that's like if you're also playing a fair draw engine and you have Dowsing Machine to get back your second Field Blower. If you're playing a Zorak deck, obviously Zorak relies on abilities, but I think 2 Field Blowers and a Dowsing Machine is fine, since Zorak can draw through their decks and their Colruses will usually net them a lot of draw. But if you're playing something else that needs abilities that's not a Zorak deck, 3 is probably good. Pokemon Ranger may see play as a soft counter to Seismitoad EX. So I say soft counter because Pokemon Ranger is not knocking out Seismitoad EX, right? It's not winning you the game right then and there. Where a hard counter would be something like Counter Energy Shaman from Shining Legends, or even playing Golisopod GX as your partner in a deck, because that actually knocks out Seismitoad. It's a hard counter. It's actively dealing with the card. Pokemon Ranger stops the effects of Quaking Punch for 1 turn so that you can use items. Now this can be chained so you can play Pokemon Ranger, then Versus Seeker it back in that turn in preparation for the next. And then over a course of time it will help you against Seismitoad EX, but that's why I say it's a soft counter and not a hard counter. I do not expect Zoroark to win Dallas Regionals. I think Zorak Golisopod is a very good choice for this deck, and I think a lot of top players would agree with me on that. I think Zorak Golisopod has a great chance at winning the tournament, as does Zorak Garbodor. So, in closing, my top 3 choices for this tournament are Zorak Golisopod, Zorak Garbodor, and Sceptile GX. I've been testing 2 variants of that, and do look out for my FlipsideGaming.com article this week before Dallas Regionals for a whole bunch of lists, matchups, some more meta information, and I'll go over the Sceptile GX variants that I'm interested in. Those are definitely my lowest choices, but I've been having fun playing them, and they're different, and they're things that people don't test against. But Zorak Golisopod and Zorak Garbodor just sound very, very promising. And if you're testing one of those and you're comfortable with them, I think you're on the right track here. So I hope this meta forecast can help you. If there's any questions at all you have, please let me know. I'd be happy to help. And if you have any suggestions for meta forecasts and meta discussion in the future, please leave that down in the comments below. I'd appreciate a subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this in the future. And good luck if you're competing at Dallas Regionals. I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.